Hello, aspirants, and welcome. Today, we're diving into a really critical issue. It's something you're seeing in the headlines, but more importantly, it's a core topic for your GS Paper 3, the dangerous trap of predatory loan apps. We're going to unpack how technology, the economy, and, social vulnerability all come together in this massive problem.
Let's be very clear about why this is so urgent. The tragic case of Nithin Raj in Kannur. It's just a stark, heartbreaking reminder of the real human cost here. And this isn't some one-off incident. It's a pattern, a predatory one. For you as future administrators, getting to the root of this kind of exploitation is, well, it's absolutely non-negotiable.
Exactly. And to help you build a really solid, structured answer for your exam, we've broken this entire analysis down into 5 key parts. First, we'll look at the problem itself. Then we'll dissect the predatory playbook they use, we'll examine the regulatory gaps, then talk about some concrete solutions, and finally, we'll tie it all directly to what you need for your mains and interview preparation.
All right, let's get right into it. The first thing we need to wrap our heads around is the sheer nature and scale of this devious menace. We're talking about both the human and the economic costs.
So what's really happening here? The most crucial point is that these apps are thriving in a sort of regulatory blind spot. They dangle the promise of easy, instant cash, especially to people who can't easily get loans from formal banks. They're exploiting a very real need, you see, particularly among students and young people. But their actual business? It's data theft and coercion, plain and simple.
And the numbers? They're truly staggering. In Kerala, this was the 3rd such tragedy in just 4 months. One single police district saw over 35 complaints just since January. But what's even more concerning, and this is a key point for your answers, is the angle of caste-based discrimination that emerged in Nithin's case. The fact that the National Commission for Scheduled Castes had to step in, it just shows you the deep, multi-layered nature of this crisis.
Precisely. So now let's get a bit more analytical. To write a high-scoring mains answer, you absolutely have to be able to explain the exact modus operandi. So let's break down this predatory playbook, step by step.
It's a very systematic 4-step trap. First, they lure you in with these promises of quick, hassle-free money. The second you install the app, it scrapes your entire digital life. We're talking contacts, photos, your location, everything. This data is then often shot off to servers, maybe in North India or even overseas, way beyond the easy reach of local police. And then comes the final step. If there's even a small delay in repayment, they unleash these so-called recovery agents who use your own personal data to harass, blackmail, and just completely destroy your reputation.
And this brings us right to the heart of the issue from a GS3 syllabus perspective, the regulatory gaps. Why are these apps able to get away with all this? This is all about the challenges our regulatory bodies are facing in this new digital age.
So, the fundamental question you have to ask is this. Why aren't the existing regulations, including the RBI's own digital lending guidelines, enough to stop these guys? Let's take a closer look.
Just look at this comparison. It's night and day, really. On one hand, you have the regulated entities, like NBFCs. They're under the RBI's watch. They have to use formal legal channels for recovery. But on the other hand, you have these predatory apps. They're completely unregulated. They use pure harassment. They often operate from abroad, and if they get banned, they just pop up again under a new name.
And right here, this is the core governance challenge. The RBI's job is to regulate financial entities. But these operators, they're working in the app and data layers. They are essentially tech companies, disguised as lenders, whose real business is data theft and extortion. This puts them in a tricky gray area, just outside the RBI's direct line of sight. Absolutely. So, we've defined the problem, we've identified the gaps. Now, for what is probably the most important part of your answer, the way forward. Let's talk about a multi-pronged solution to actually dismantle this trap.
Okay, so a fantastic way to structure these solutions in your answer is to think of it as a 3-layered defense: technological, legal, and financial. First, on the tech front, we could mandate something called an OS-level sandbox for any app that calls itself financial. What that simply means is the phone's operating system would technically block the app from ever accessing your contacts or photos. Then, you bring in the legal layer. We need a specific law just for digital lending, with really strict penalties to act as a proper deterrent. And finally, the financial layer, which is all about being a gatekeeper. We need to require these apps to have a cryptographically signed certificate from a regulated bank or an NBFC. This would link the anonymous app to a real accountable institution. You combine that with stricter KYC norms on payment aggregators, and suddenly it becomes much, much harder for these crooks to move money around and to hide.
All right, let's bring all of this together and focus sharply on the exam itself. How do you take all this analysis and convert it into high scores in GS3 and confidently handle questions in your interview?
So how could this show up on your mains paper? Well, you might get a question about the regulatory challenges. That's where you discuss that dark area and present on multi-pronged solutions. Or you could get a statement-based question like, financial inclusion without financial literacy is a recipe for disaster. The issue of students falling into these traps is a perfect case study for that. Or it could be very direct, asking for the technological and legislative steps needed. And for that, our points on sandboxing, new laws, and certificates give you a ready-made, powerful framework for your answer.
And to wrap up, let's leave you with this final thought, something to really ponder for your essay or interview. While all the tech and laws are crucial, what is the role of digital financial literacy? How do we empower our citizens, our youth, to identify and avoid these traps in the first place? Think about that societal dimension. That's all for now. All the best for your preparations.